the 2019 winner, Joe Burrow, Louisiana State University.
Auburn wins the BCS National Championship.
Oh, my goodness. One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
That's right. We've got more Heisman talk coming at you like right now. And I love this scenic. This is obviously Bristol, Connecticut, where we are located. This morning it was snowing. I was very disappointed about it, but now it looks like a beautiful, beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I wanted to start the show on a good mood, Christina, but then you had to go and remind me that it snowed. That's great.
It's not snowing right now, and I'm just always cold, so I thought we should let our people know what's happening in our lives. Welcome into the Heisman Show, presented by Nissan, the premier partner of the Heisman Trophy. I'm Christine Williamson, and before I say his name, I'm just going to let you guys know there are multiple Trevors on the show tonight. So if I get some Trevors wrong, just know they're somewhat interchangeable.
Just keep up.
This, however, is Trevor Scales.
Hello, how are we?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you here.
Good to be here.
We actually have another ATL shouty on the show. It's Harry Lyles Jr. with his backpack on. Sorry, I can't get over it. He looks like he has his backpack on. He's ready to go to school. It's great. So let's talk about Trevor, because we're talking about Trevors, and we just found out some college football wrecking news almost. Trevor Lawrence has tested positive for COVID. And I'm going to start this asking you, Harry, because you were a huge part of this conversation this morning when we were talking about this. What were your thoughts when you found out that Trevor Lawrence tested positive for COVID?
I mean, for me, it was another one, right? I mean, I obviously hope that he recovers from this. They said he's been experiencing mild symptoms, and hopefully that's as bad as it gets. Hopefully he makes a full recovery. But there's still a lot that we don't know about this virus, and that's very scary to think about. But I also kind of went on Twitter and was kind of looking like, okay, like, what's the reaction here? And a lot of it was like surprise, which is kind of, strange and upsetting a little bit because, everybody here and then everybody watching at home, we've known for weeks now that, there's been outbreaks all over the country. It's still going on as we speak now. I think today was the most cases that we've had in a single day in the United States. And, if you're surprised by Trevor Lawrence getting coronavirus, I mean, you might be part of the problem because nothing has really changed between March 11th and today. So, obviously hoping that he's getting well and things like that. But, it's kind of frightening just that, even that this news came as a shock to people given how many coronavirus cases we've had in college football alone.
Yeah, to be shocked is to be naive, clearly, right? Like, this thing does not discriminate. It very clearly can run up on anybody at any given time.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself should tell you that this shouldn't be an exception to any sort of mind that has watched, as Harry said, from March to this point. But I will say, like, when it comes to our assessment of having received the news, one thing I always hope for is that it doesn't get treated as if it is automatic that the man will recover in a week or so and be right back on the field, back to normal. Because as you said, Christine, nobody really knows everything about this deal. We're all working through this on a day-by-day basis, and this isn't some regular injury. This is a deadly disease to some, and it has been harmful to many others. And so understand the severity of this as we're sort of working through his recovery process.
Yeah, it's certainly something to pay attention to, not just on the football field, but also in real life. And so here are a few details about kind of what we're looking at with Trevor Lawrence. He obviously is out tomorrow versus Boston College. He said he has mild symptoms, and his test was taken on Wednesday. He must quarantine at least 10 days, either from the onset of symptoms or from his positive test. Assuming his symptoms fade and he eventually tests negative, he might be able to play in next week's showdown against number 4 Notre Dame, which is what everybody's talking about. Trevor Lawrence also tweeted, he was actually the person who said that we can go on and put this information out there. He said, I have tested positive for COVID-19 and my symptoms have been relatively mild while I'm following the protocol from Clemson and the ACC. The only thing that hurts is missing an opportunity to be with my teammates this weekend and play the game I love. I hate that I can't be there, but I'll be watching from isolation and pulling for our guys while I wait for the opportunity to rejoin the team. God bless and go Tigers. Here's my thing, because I was a college athlete. Trevor, you were a college athlete, and I understand how college athletes are, right? Like, when you get injured, you are just trying to get back on the field. You might even play through something. And I feel like it's very interesting that, Trevor Lawrence's tweet was like, hey, I can't wait to get back out there on the field with my guys. But like you said, this is not only impacting people and just like where they can be back in a week or two. People are dying from this. People are extremely ill from this. So I just find it very interesting that his focus is the football field.
Yeah, no, and that's, to your point, exactly what it comes down to. The mentality of any college athlete that wants to play ball will fight through anything and not tell just everything when it comes to how bad you're feeling or whatever have you. So that's another level to the concern that should be applied to this situation.
And we've seen COVID impact so many teams, so many players. And Harry, I'll go to you again because you talked about this before we even started the show. How will coronavirus impact the college football season? So how do you think that this news impacts the college football season?
You know, as far as the Heisman race goes, I would hope that it's not held against him. And obviously, I think this is going to be different on a case-by-case basis. But, you know, with college football, I think we're kind of being a little bit more realistic than some other sports might be in terms of just like what we're dealing with here, right? Like, as far as like, let's say Major League Baseball goes, right? Like they treat their, you know, record books and their awards and things like that, you know, holier than some sacred texts. And, you know, with college football, you know, obviously there's a ton of tradition and stuff like that. But, you know, let's say that Trevor Lawrence misses just one game. He recovers from this 100%. He's absolutely fine. Then he goes on to have a great season and a Heisman winning season. You know, I think they'll give it to him. But obviously it's going to depend because we don't know if he's only going to miss one game. He could miss 2 games, you know, just on the basis of not even being sick, just based on, you know, the amount of time that you have to have between your positive test and then being cleared. So it's really going to vary. I do think that, you know, Heisman voters are going to be a little bit more flexible this year, given the circumstances, because we have decided to play college football in a global pandemic after all, right?
Yeah. Go
I was
ahead,
just going to
Trev.
say, this is the ultimate season of subjectivity, down to the teams that we're assessing on a weekly basis, right? Like, everybody understands that none of this is normal. None of these sort of stipulations that we're under are normal circumstances. So we adjust with nuance, with whatever have you. Obviously, sometimes there's a bit of cognitive dissonance practice in order to make yourself feel okay about watching these people go out there unpaid to subject themselves to money making for an institution that is larger to them in the midst of a global pandemic. But that's an aside.
I do want to ask one more quick question because T-Law was kind of at the forefront of we want to play, the college football players saying that we absolutely want to play this season. He was one of the first players to tweet about the fact that they wanted to play. So do you feel like they've done this correctly? Like, do you feel like college football has gotten this right?
It's so subjective because there's no real solution that we've seen to date outside of the WNBA and the NBA that is quote unquote foolproof, right? And we knew going into this because football was against going into the bubble and they said that they don't have the resources nor the time to set those things up.
Yeah.
It was inevitable that there were going to be outbreaks like this. Now, how they manage the outbreaks afterwards is the larger question that we're still waiting to see on a case-by-case basis. But I think we knew going into this thing that there was going to be situations just like this.
All right, so one thing it does do for, I guess, other Heisman hopefuls is it does kind of open things up a bit because they're getting a week, maybe even 2 weeks up on Trevor Lawrence, assuming he does come back and is healthy. So let's take a look at where we are with the Heisman race. T-Law, obviously, number 1. He has 72 points. Mac Jones is right behind him with 51. Obviously, Alabama also undefeated. Justin Fields back on the football field. He's number 3 with 45 points. Then we have Zach Wilson, our guy. We love to talk about him. He has 20 points. And those are 4 quarterbacks, right? Then we get into the other guys, the guys that Trevor.
The other guys. That's so
Trevor
disrespectful.
Scales is really into.
So
Najee Harris with 17 and Travis Etienne right behind him. Obviously, like I said, Justin Fields is back, baby. He's already number 3 in the Heisman race with 48 points, like I mentioned. So the top 6 guys remain unchanged. Harry, I'm going to ask you this. We saw Justin Fields for the first time on October 24th. Very exciting. What did you see out of him that impressed you, especially with his Heisman hopes?
I mean, listen, he lived up to the expectation that, you know, Nebraska fans and faithful fought so hard for, right, was to see their team get busted by Justin Fields in Ohio State. But, you know, aside from that, listen, like, I kind of had to stop myself for a minute because I saw a lot of people on the timeline talking about, you know, he's baby Cam. And for me, I was like, I kind of took a step back because, you know, there's college quarterbacks and then there was Cam Newton. But the way that he showed his abilities on Saturday was just another reminder of, like, why we were talking about this guy being in the conversation in the first place without him having played it down. He's just that good. And, I think he only had one incompletion. It's amazing that, just the way that we've seen all the rust that some of these players have had, in this weird season that we're playing. And he was still hitting guys in stride, making the best decisions out there on the field. So, I mean, hey, one game, but he's already inserted himself into the conversation.
And that one incompletion, Harry, if you were watching that game, it was a drop. He hit his receiver dead in the hand. So, that's
Yep.
what's scary about what he's doing already.
Yeah, of course. Of course, like I said, Trevor Lawrence, not because these Trevors are going to trip me up, I swear.
You got to go
Trevor
last name. Go Lawrence from here on out. Yeah.
Sunshine not being in this weekend is certainly going to give some hopes to some other people. Who do you expect to make a huge step this
The
weekend?
gentleman that we just talked about, Justin Fields, he's got the biggest stage to play on. And I'm not just saying that as a company man, the ABC Prime game being them, Ohio State playing against Penn State. That is the biggest possible stage for him to sort of make some noise in a week where Trevor Lawrence is sitting.
Harry, I know you're kind of hot on Etienne, right? So with Trevor, goodness gracious, with Trevor Lawrence out, where do you think that puts Etienne? Does it kind of up his chances in this Heisman race a little bit?
I mean, listen, I think Travis Etienne, the thing about him is that he doesn't even necessarily need Trevor Lawrence to be out. He is the type of talent to where he can have 2 or 3 games where you're like, wait a second, why did we stop giving this guy more consideration in the first place? Because he can absolutely run or catch himself into the race at the very top whenever he wants to. And that doesn't even have to be against a weaker team like a Georgia Tech or a Syracuse. He could do it against anybody. And I think that is kind of the danger of him, and why that we've talked about him in such high regard is that, it's kind of amazing that this guy's even playing college football this year. He could be playing in the NFL right now.
All right, so I know you like to talk about running backs, but let's talk about QBs a little bit. Sure. Do you think that guys we obviously talk about T-Law and Justin Fields a lot. So do you think that guys like Mac Jones, guys like Zach Wilson, even though Zach is at BYU, have a better chance now with T-Law not playing this weekend and possibly even next weekend?
There's a chance, but to break it down specifically to Mac Jones, what he's suffering from is this sort of dynamic where last year we saw Tua in there and we understand what that offense can do with just about anybody, and he's having to essentially live up to that level of productivity.
Yeah.
That's dang near impossible, right?
Yeah.
And we also understand what he has in his receiving core. Zach Wilson, I do like the idea of him making a leap, but again, it takes the stage. It takes the setting of the game and who their matchup is against, and I don't necessarily know if they'll have enough steam in that regard to make some headway on that.
All right, that makes sense. So what else makes sense is the fact that we've got our own running back in studio, which means we're going to talk a little running backs, and we talked about him already. Let's talk a little bit more Travis Etienne.
When he was a true freshman, we were in a scrimmage, and they ran a sweep to our left. He took it for a touchdown, and we're like, dang, who is this guy?
Exactly. Even 4 years later, Etienne's resume doesn't match his recognition. Consider this. He is already the ACC's all-time leader in career touchdowns.
Etienne stays on his feet and finds the end zone.
And is on pace to leave Clemson as the league's all-time leading rusher. But he's never going to tell you that.
We're all like, dude, you know how good you are and the things that you've accomplished? And he's like, what? I just run the football.
A silent assassin. He won't hype himself up, but when he puts that helmet on, man, he's gonna deliver.
Humble but hungry.
Yeah.
I think that's what they call. I think that's what they call that, right? Humble but hungry. He doesn't even know he's that good. He just is that good. So we saw some of the accolades that he has. He's explosive. He's obviously a baller running back, very humble, like I said. So what impresses you the most as a former running back about Etienne?
Man, look, the first thing that jumps off the page, we talk about technique as a running back, and a lot of things are instinctual in a sense. And one of those things being the concept of speed through the hole, not to the hole. So there's a matter of patience. That's a word that's thrown out often when it comes to assessing running backs and what their capabilities are in the backfield. It's the idea of timing things right so that things develop in front of you and you hit a seam and you maximize the potential yardage of a play. Travis Etienne is one of the best at doing that, and his acceleration is second to none. So once he does hit that top speed, it's faster than anybody on the defense can get to it. And so once he sees that gap, he takes advantage of it, and it's off to the races. And more often than not, he's not getting caught from behind, but his acceleration is just exceptional. Beyond that, it's a matter of size to strength ratio. This brother is 5'10", 205 pounds is what he's listed at, but he definitely put on a little bit more weight. As you can see from the film there, this joker runs with a head of steam that makes my head hurt on a play-by-play basis. I cannot imagine the amount of faces that he stretches every single play, and nobody wants to tackle a joker like that runs as angrily as he does.
You're putting yourself in his shoes, and you're just like, I can't even do this myself.
Listen.
So I do want to ask, he is a Heisman hopeful, of course, but I'm assuming he also wants to play at the next level in the NFL. What NFL player would you compare Etienne to?
Now, I touched on the size to strength ratio, and one thing that jumps out in that regard, one person that jumps out in that regard is Alvin Kamara, right? Like, this is a dude that isn't necessarily the biggest frame, but he runs with a power about himself that gets jokers up off of him. Now, Alvin is one of the smoothest athletes that I've ever seen, right? Everything looks effortless. We've seen his training videos where he's standing on top of a Bosu ball and catching things that are color coordinated and juggling at the same. It's a mess. But regardless, he's just incredibly gifted, and everything that he does looks so daggone smooth. But that's not to take away from what Travis Etienne looks like. Again, I mentioned that he runs angry. Everything he does looks very powerful, looks very intentional, and everything is calculated in a sense, but he's getting the maximum amount of effort out of every step that he takes.
Harry, I'm going to bring you into this conversation. Obviously, Etienne is a teammate of T-Law, who's the front runner. What do you think Etienne needs to do in order to possibly win the Heisman?
I mean, listen, if he just keeps being himself, I think he can do it. And, to Trevor's point, he really does play just like Alvin Kamara in a way that is just so interesting and compelling, to where it's like, I don't know that you've ever seen running backs like these two guys that are really able to take over a game. And honestly, they're some of the most unguardable people in football. And, Trevor, you also mentioned his ability to kind of sit back, find the gap and then shoot through it. I think the dangerous part about Etienne is that, yes, he plays like Kamara, but he's also got that particular skill that Le'Veon Bell has. And it's almost crazy to kind of watch him play football, because you're like, hey, like, what are you waiting on? And all of a sudden you see him hit the gap and you're like, that's what he was waiting on.
All right, let's go to the SEC. Let's talk about Najee Harris. We mentioned him. We saw that he was ranked right one slot ahead of Etienne in the last Heisman watch we just looked at. Alabama has had some pretty solid running backs come through there in the past 10 years. Who would you compare Harris to? Oh,
he's just one of those cats that we talked about size to strength ratio. Like, even though he's 6'3", 230, like he's still maxing out on that regard. But he has like a lot of these different capabilities. And I know Harry could touch on just the incorporation of all of these skill sets, but he just is a big joker that nobody wants to tackle to me.
So where would you put him in this ranking?
It's hard to necessarily put him within the pantheon, because he takes so many different parts of these guys, and he doesn't get the necessarily opportunities to be as productive as some of these cats, because once he got to Alabama, that offense opened up and they were looking at the receiving core and getting that ball out courtesy of an athlete in the middle of it all into a Tagovailoa. So he hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to be at the highest peak of productivity at the running back position that a lot of the other cats have.
Harry, where do you feel like Najee ranks? How do you feel like he compares to these other Alabama guys?
I'm kind of with Trevor on this. It's hard to say. I would definitely, at the very least, put him somewhere in the middle. The funny thing about Alabama football that I love to just kind of think about sometimes is that, we don't really worry about the quarterback outside of Mac Jones and Tua Tagovailoa, but when it comes to the running backs, it's almost insane just how much talent they constantly cycle back through there. And obviously they do that all over across the field and things like that, but the thing with the Alabama running backs is they're all very good, but they all have very specific things that they are good at. For somebody like a Trent Richardson, he was very good at juking people. Obviously, you had the famous one that he did against the guy at Ole Miss. TJ Yeldon was very good at juking guys over, just very versatile, like a weaker in terms of strength Alvin Kamara type. And then, obviously Derrick Henry is just like one of the biggest guys out on the football field and will just run over you with no regard. So, I think that Najee Harris is another one of those guys where, he's a bigger dude, I think bigger than most people think. And, he will run over you, but he also has that breakaway speed. But in terms of the Alabama running backs we've seen in recent years, I would, at the very worst, put him somewhere in the middle.
At the worst. All right, Harry, I'm going to ask you this question first. What do you think that he needs to do, Harris, to win the Heisman?
Honestly, I don't like saying this because he's a very talented player on his own, but I think he's got to hope that Mac Jones kind of has a few more incompletions per game.
Yeah.
You know, just because it's like, I think Mac is completing 78% of his passes right now, and it's kind of hard to look at a guy like that and say, well, somebody else on his team is better than him. But I think he's got to hope for some of that, and then obviously have some of these bigger games and these SEC football games that we're going to see. And, you know, a lot of those are going to be in prime time because we are talking about Alabama after all. So, you know, he is one of those types of players, just like Etienne. It could be 1 or 2 games where he runs himself back into the conversation, and we start asking ourselves, why did we ever stop talking about him in the first place?
It's something to what we were talking about pre-pro and all of this, Harry, in that it's usually the Heisman conversation is centered around the most outstanding player. And it's hard to kind of say that Najee wouldn't be the most outstanding player, but the stats that you delivered about Mac Jones, with him completing dang near 80% of his passes, it's tough to look away from that in a sense.
So I'd imagine that on a Saturday, the one thing that you're looking at across the board is running backs on different teams. What other running backs that we haven't talked about are impressing you so far this season?
This is a tough situation for the 2 gentlemen that I'm about to mention. And down at UNC Chapel Hill, Michael Carter and Javonte Williams are a tandem in that Tar Heel backfield that have caused problems for so many different defenses. And I know the Heisman conversation when it comes to that Tar Heel uniform is typically centered around Sam Howell. But these 2 jokers can run their behinds off too. Javonte Williams is more of the goal line back. He's racked up 10 touchdowns in these 5 games that they've played. Michael Carter's the guy that they usually use between the 20s. He's only got 3 scores on the year. It's like a lightning and thunder cliche combo that they've got going on, but these jokers have rushed for 100 yards per outing in every one of their times on the field. So it's hard to deny the productivity that they're putting forth.
That sounds like a scary duo.
Yes, very much so.
Speaking of scary,
yeah,
it is a very scary weekend, so we're going to bring in another Trevor to the
quick
show.
change.
Things are getting a little scary. I don't know if you guys know this, but tomorrow's Halloween, and because we have so many Trevors on this show, I'm not calling you Trevor today. I'm calling you Dr. Stein, because we're going to have you build our ultimate Heisman. It says Frankenstein, even though Frankenstein is the name of the doctor, so our ultimate Heisman monster.
Yeah, key word. Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster. So, yeah.
Okay. So, Dr. Stein, who is not the monster, we would like you to build our ultimate Heisman monster from the ground up. So, we'll start with the feet. Which player would be the feet if we were building our ultimate Heisman monster?
Clemson running back Travis Etienne. And Christine, what makes these feet amazing is how fast they go from 0 to full speed. His burst is astonishing. And whether that's he's in the hole, he makes a stutter step and he goes straight ahead, or he's in the hole and it's closed and he's got to burst laterally. That burst is something that nobody else can keep up with because they're going from 0 to full speed at a much slower rate. The speed at which his feet move are what make those feet the best in college football.
You know what they call that, or what the rap lyric is for that?
What's that?
0 to 100 real quick. Shout out Drake.
Okay.
So we're going to build our way up. Let's go to the legs.
Nice. Well, the legs, once you get those feet moving fast, now you need those legs to carry them a long distance. Anthony Schwartz, receiver, Auburn. Not just one of the fastest men in college football, one of the fastest men in the world. A couple of years ago, coming out of high school, he competed in the World Track Championships in the 100 meters in Finland for people under the age of 20. He came in second. He won silver. Second fastest man in the world at the 100 meters under the age of 20. And he doesn't just have that speed in a straight line. He's got good football moves as well. So he's not just a track guy. But you put the feet of Etienne with those legs to carry you the distance, good luck.
Not trying to race him in a foot race. All right, what do we got for the heart?
The heart is Texas quarterback Sam Ehlinger.
Okay.
This guy has the body of a middle linebacker, but more importantly, he's got the mind and the heart of a middle linebacker. You could put him in the middle of the defense, and he would light people up as a tackler. But instead, he's a quarterback.
Yeah.
And I don't trust anybody in college football more than I do Ehlinger to put a team on his back and carry them through the hardest times. And it's not just that he's willing to do it, Christine. He likes to do it.
Yeah.
He wants the hits like a middle linebacker, the heart.
And you like to compare him to Tim Tebow, who also was a heart guy and obviously a Heisman winner. All right, for the arms, who do we have?
Okay, for the arm, let's go with stiff arm instead of throwing arm. Because Najee Harris, running back from Alabama, doesn't just put that arm on you to keep you away from him. He puts that stiff arm on you to cause harm to you. And it's one thing just to put it out there and he gets by you and keeps going. If he can, Najee Harris will stiff arm you to the ground. Because he doesn't just want to defeat you, he wants to embarrass you. Now, we've got all kinds of guys, quarterbacks, that can throw the ball really well. But you know what? The arm that stands out to me is the one that punishes, and that's Najee Harris.
You do not want to be on the other side of that, and that's, no, nobody does. All right, who do we got for the hands?
Okay, the hands, Alabama wide receiver Devontae Smith.
Okay.
Now, this guy has not dropped the pass all year. Not dropped the pass. As a matter of fact, of the top 20 receivers in college football in catchable targets, so it's a catchable pass that's been thrown to him, he's the only one without a drop. And you normally see him as a guy that runs the great routes, that has all the speed, catches the ball 50 yards down the field, right? That all makes it more complicated to not drop a single one. And nobody can match what this guy does for sure hands.
Two guys from Alabama that are making up this monster. I guess it's to be expected. So we have one more thing to go, and that is the vision.
All right, so vision, let's go back to the evil empire.
Okay.
And let's go with Alabama quarterback Mac Jones. The thing is, the guy he replaced, the legend, Tua Tagovailoa, was an instinctual monster. He would get the ball to the right spot more because he felt it than he really saw it. Jones gets to the same place in the opposite way.
Yeah.
He sees the defense, reads his progressions, and gets to the same places that Tua did. Just gets there in a different way. And in a lot of ways, it's more predictable. Mac Jones, in the way he sees the field and then knows how to apply his tools on the offense with all those playmakers, it has some of the best vision in college football. Now, you'll note that we haven't yet talked about Trevor Lawrence of Clemson or Justin Fields of Ohio State.
Yeah.
Well, they get all the love. Yeah, you put them in there, and they would have a lot of these qualities all by themselves, right? And so they get a lot of love. Let's give some other guys as examples of what greatness looks like.
So what you're saying is they're already a Heisman Frankenstein, so we got to we have to combine all these other people just to make one of them.
In a lot of ways.
Okay.
In a lot of ways.
So Harry, we now understand why Trevor Lawrence, why Justin Fields is not making up this monster. What do you think about Dr. Maddichstein's Frankenstein?
Listen, I think it's great. He's our mad scientist for a reason, right? I would ask, though, Trevor, if you could take qualities from a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields and add it to this monster, like what would that look like? What would that be?
Harry, that's a great question. I would say leadership on both of those guys. The best coaches in football at every level will tell you that the most important quality of a quarterback is his leadership. Do the players believe in him? Do they rally when he calls on them to rally? And great arm, great legs on both Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. But what really sets them apart is that their leadership is elite.
Okay, so can we take this back to the quarterbacks really fast? If the arm was a quarterback, who would it be?
If the arm was a quarterback, I would say Zach Wilson. Of BYU.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
Because Zach Wilson has that lightning quick release, and it can go in any direction. I mean, he'll look this way, throw that way. He'll look this way, feel a receiver that's on the opposite side of the field, and throw across his body 60 yards in the air for a touchdown. We saw him do that.
A little Patrick Mahomes.
It is exactly. It's a crazy arm
Yeah.
that he's got. Other guys have good arms too, but Zach Wilson makes your jaw drop all the way to the ground, and Dr. Frankenstein would have to sew it back on.
Okay. Well, I do want to give a shout out to our guy, Bags, who put that whole thing together, that graphic that you guys saw, because it was fire. And I was not expecting it to look this good. It looks like a real, actual person almost. And I was expecting it to look a little bit more like a monster. So shout out Bags, and also shout out Dr. Maddichstein. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
That's right. I'm gonna go scare some people now.
Exactly. Thanks. All right, so we got some games coming up this weekend. One of the most important ones, of course, Ohio State, Penn State, but there are some other games, and I know that, Harry, you yourself are looking forward to Florida versus Missouri. It's their first game, Florida's first game since October 10th, and what exactly are you looking for in this matchup?
Hey, listen, we've had a lot of Trevors on this show, and we're looking at a bunch of Kyles in Florida. Kyle Pitts, we're going to, we were talking about it earlier with, Trevor Lawrence, but, with Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts, we're going to see, hey, how do they come back from being off for 2 weeks and reinsert themselves into the Heisman conversation? I know for myself, I am a little bit higher on Kyle Pitts than most people are just because he's a tight end. But, you know, the Heisman is about the most outstanding player in the country. And, you know, he's played like one of them. So I am still very eager to see what he's going to come out with this time off looking like.
All right, Trevor Scales back with us. And so when you look at these games that we just looked at, Clemson versus Boston College, Alabama, Mississippi State, Ohio State at Penn State, Florida at Missouri, what are you looking for in those 5 games?
I think it goes back to that Heisman conversation that we were having earlier about Justin Fields being able to continue to stake his claim within this Heisman conversation in Ohio State, and in a larger sense, continue to make their campaign known for the national title, because that's every bit of this Big Ten schedule debacle that we're sort of witnessing between Wisconsin and Nebraska. They recognize that they have no wiggle room, right?
Yeah.
So every single opportunity that you hit the field on a Saturday, it needs to be abundantly clear that you are a dominant team that is worthy of being ranked in the top 4 of the nation by the end of this thing. And so this is another chance for Ohio State to do that, given the stage at Penn State against a team that has given them the fits in years past.
Yeah.
This is the perfect opportunity to sort of make a statement.
So, Harry, I'll ask you this question, the last question of the show. Last week, your front runner was Trevor Lawrence. He's not playing this weekend. Who is your front runner going into this weekend?
Going into this weekend, I'm still going with Trevor Lawrence. But if you're asking me, you know, who I expected to be coming out of this week, I think I'm going to go with Mac Jones unless he throws, 5 more incompletions.
All right. Well, that's what we got. I haven't asked you your front runner.
Oh,
who's your front runner?
So, like, as in right now, who am I picking to lift the Heisman Trophy up at this very moment? I would actually still go Trevor Lawrence, similarly to Harry, because, look, if everything sort of goes the way that we've seen it go with the other myriad cases of COVID-19, like we expect him to make a recovery, we expect him to sort of be back to his normal self. It's hard to see anybody removing him from the throne that he sort of claimed at this point.
All right, so hopefully he is healthy as soon as possible.
Above all else.
That's all we got. Thank you for watching the Heisman Show, presented by Nissan, the premier partner of the Heisman Trophy. We will see you guys next week with a little less
Wear a
Trevor's,
mask.
maybe.